So they're being, so yeah, I guess I have quite a few questions about it, but I don't know, how much you can divulge, but I'm curious. You're saying there's images being uploaded or images being downloaded?
That the IP address from this lot had associated to it in a peer-to-peer software program. And our task force affiliate was able to download that video and images from the folder of the IP address
Okay,
to this.
gotcha.
This thing. Well, that's one of the things too, and
Hey everyone, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. It is Monday, May 22nd, 2023. And in about 10 days, 11 days, there's going to be a brand new Duggar docu-series dropping on Amazon Prime. And in the days leading up to this new series being released, a lot of outlets have been given a sneak peek at what we'll be able to expect in this new docu-series. I did a video on Friday about some things that Jill Duggar had actually revealed in a deposition and in some documents from a court record related to her parents. And now there is some new details about the cover-up that Jim, Bob, and Michelle were involved in when it related to Josh. Now, the cover-up was related to not only Josh not having what he did to his sisters be reported to the proper authorities, but also the cover-up from TLC and the network about their family, which ultimately led to them being out on TLC for so many seasons. Bear in mind, TLC met the Duggars in 2004, and Josh Duggar was doing things to his sisters from 2001 to 2003, 2004. And so in the middle of a lot of what was happening with them filming for the specials for TLC and Discovery, they were dealing with Josh and the girls. And then an investigation into Josh was in 2006, okay? And they were filming specials and the series at this point. The Duggars were literally hiding things in plain sight from TLC, acting as though this was all in the past when it really wasn't in the past. It was actually in the present. And the girls literally never got any help because of it. And so now we're learning more about the actual cover-up from the docu-series as told by Jim and Bobby Holt, who are friends with the Duggars, or formerly friends with the Duggars. So the cover-up was apparently never going to be disclosed, and Michelle and Jim Bob never planned to tell anyone about it until Josh got married. And then Josh was going to be the one to tell his wife. So let's dive into today's topic. Before we do, can you please do me a big favor and give this video a thumbs up? Also, please subscribe to my channel if you've not yet subscribed by clicking on the subscribe button down below. Make sure to leave a comment if you have something to say. Share this video with your friends, and let's get started. So this brand new article comes from the New York Post, and I just want to I know that this is from the docu-series, and so I'm just gonna go off of this is what they're reporting, and then I'll tell you what Jim and Bobby Holt told me that's a little bit contradictory to what is being reported from what they say in the series. So apparently, the cover-up that Josh Duggar obviously was involved in was his parents not doing their due diligence to make sure that not only the girls were safe in their home, but also reporting what Josh had done to the proper authorities. Apparently, they find out about this, friends of the family find out about this years after he had started doing this. And it was only because Josh was actually dating the daughter of Jim and Bobby Holt. So Josh and Kaylee Holt were actually involved in what's called a betrothal. And when they were about 14 or 15 years old, their parents decided that they would be betrothed to be married, meaning they promised themselves to marriage at 14 years old. Don't even get me started on how bizarre that part of it is. And this is not uncommon in this world. But apparently, they never planned to tell Jim and Bobby Holt about any of this, and they were just going to allow Josh to tell Kaylee once they got married. But in the documentary, according to page 6, Jim Holt said that Jim Bob said that Josh had gotten into some trouble and that he had touched his sisters inappropriately. Then Jim said that Jim Holt mentioned that Bobby then once referred to this touching as SA to Michelle, or the M word, CM. And Michelle shot back at her and said, "Don't you say that again." So the Duggars wanted to call it inappropriate touching. They did not want it referred to as SA. Got it? And Jim said that Josh had been doing this since he was 12, and we found out when he was 15. And then they asked the Duggars when they were planning on telling his family. And they said, Michelle said, we weren't going to have them tell you guys at all. We were going to have Josh confess to Kaylee once they were married. So they never planned to tell anyone about this. They never planned to say a thing to anyone about this. But Josh took things to a place that it went over a line, apparently. And that line was when he did something to his younger sister in front of other people while she was sitting on his lap during Bible time. And it was this incident that prompted them to call Jim and Bobby Holt over to the house to have Josh disclose what he had done. Now, Bobby had testified to this at trial, and so she explained what they were told, that they were sitting in a room and that Josh explained what he had done. And Jim and Bobby Holt had also said that they had told them that the reason why they were telling them was because they claimed that Josh had then cheated on Kaylee. And so because Josh had done this, they were not looking at this as a form of like an essay, but rather they were saying Josh had cheated on Kaylee, and so we need to let you know. So Josh not only was doing stuff, but his parents were looking at this in a very skewed manner, obviously. And they believed that they could keep Josh quiet and in line if they told the Holts, and then the Holts would be like taking away something that Josh wanted. So Josh wanted Kaylee, and they felt like if they took Kaylee away, then Josh would have to figure out how to do the right thing. And so they were basically bribing Josh of, you can marry Kaylee as long as you stop doing this. The bribe is keep yourself together until you marry Kaylee. Don't say a word until you marry Kaylee. And then once you're married, tell Kaylee everything. So basically using a daughter as a bribe. Now, this shouldn't surprise any of you, because they got him married to Anna kind of as a way to, like, they couldn't deal with him. And so they needed something to keep him occupied. And so they got him a wife to occupy him, believing that if he had an outlet, he would stop doing what he was doing. So Jim Holt said that, this is what he said. I asked Jim Bob, were you basically saying you were trying to use my daughter as a carrot to get him to behave the right way? And he said, yeah, kind of. So admitting that he's being used as a bribe. I don't think this should shock you. And eventually, after years and persuasion and trying to get Jim Bob to do the right thing, they decide that they're going to go to the Arkansas State Trooper off duty, and they're going to walk in, and then they're going to go talk and have Josh confess to this. And Jim Holt's recollection is, the state trooper said, I'm going to let you go this time, but if you do it again, I'm really going to come down hard on you. Jim said that he later found out that the state trooper was a friend of Jim Bob's. Now, I want to tell you something, that this is what he says in the documentary, but in my conversation with Jim Holt in, I think, January of 2022 or late December 2021, after the trial, he told me that he knew that this guy was a friend of Jim Bob's. He told me that Corporal Hutchins was a state trooper that did inspections for cars, used cars, for used car dealers. So Jim Holt said that he told me that he knew ahead of time that they were going to go see Corporal Hutchins, and that he knew that Jim Bob knew him. Now, in this docu-series, he's telling them that he found out later. I think some of the time when Jim Holt says stuff is that he, in my opinion, tries to frame things where that he is naive and ignorant to the choices that Jim Bob is making. But I don't think that Jim Holt was naive nor ignorant, because Jim Holt and Jim Bob were best friends and had been best friends since they were kids. He knew about Jim Bob's businesses. I'm pretty sure, because he told me that he knew Corporal Hutchins was a off-duty guy that did inspections for cars, and he knew that Josh and Jim Bob knew him. So again, like, take this with a grain of salt. But that is what happened. They did go them, and Corporal Hutchins gave him a stern talking to. But here's the thing is, he completely violated his duty as an officer, because he can give him a stern talking to, but he still should have been putting in a notice to the families in needs of service, because minor children were involved. It didn't matter if Josh didn't get in trouble. It mattered that the girls were at risk. And that's where Corporal Hutchins failed, because he never reported it. And so after that, they take him out and they send him away to the Institute of Basic Life Principles in Little Rock. And then Josh joins this team where it's a group of boys that end up doing basically free labor for Bill Gothard. And then they have a guy there that reads them the Bible and talks to them about the Bible. But it's not therapy. It's basically like they work, and then that's supposed to help them. So he gets no help for his problems. And he only stays for 3 months. And so apparently Amy Duggar King, she said that she was told that he was helping families at a camp because he's a good guy like that. And Amy said she knew something was off because Josh wasn't around. Now, Josh didn't remain at the rehab very long. He was only there for 3 months. He came home right before Jim Bob's birthday, and he did so because they had a photo shoot that they needed to do for, I think, like Parents Magazine or one of their magazine articles that they were doing. This was, again, at the same time that all of these series were airing, like the episodes, like 16 kids and moving in, and 16 kids and whatever, like raising 16 kids and 14 kids and counting. You know, there was like 4 or 5 like specials before they got their documentary or their reality show. So this is going on while they're filming. And so Josh is actually seen in one of the very first episodes, 14 kids and counting, I believe, or 14 kids, the very first time you ever meet the Duggars, and he has a shaved head. So he had been sent away at that point. So once everything finally comes out, it's not because Jim Holt and Bobby Holt do anything. It's not because they tried to publicly say anything. And here's like where I never understood why Jim and Bobby Holt waited so long, is that they sat on this information for a long time. They knew that this was going on, and they didn't publicly say anything about Josh to anyone. They, behind the scenes, were probably frustrated, but they publicly were not saying anything. And then publicly, Jim Bob was actually helping Jim Holt with his campaigns. Josh is helping Jim Holt with his campaigns. Financially, they're receiving money from the Duggars. So there was incentive for them not to speak out against the Duggars. So in a way, yes, the cover-up is partially Jim Bob's fault, but all of these friends that did nothing for years are complicit in doing nothing and allowing the public for this to go on. And it doesn't actually, go in until like In Touch ends up running a story in 2015. And mind you, Jim and Bobby Holt never reported them to the, Jim Holt was a pastor and he was a mandated reporter. And he never reported Josh to the families in needs of service or to the anonymous line for children. So there was a lot of people that failed here. But the fact that Jim, Bob, and Michelle were never planning to tell anyone, they thought that Josh could just go into a marriage and then just tell Kaylee and confess after marriage, like, way to have that be set up for a disaster. And then it doesn't actually come out until In Touch runs an article, and then Josh puts out a statement and says that he did some things that were horrible. And then the Duggars go on and they do that interview with Megyn Kelly. Jessa and Jill also did the interview with Megyn Kelly. And sadly, they didn't want to do that. They were almost forced to do that. Jim Bob downplayed what Josh had done in the interview with Megyn Kelly. He said it was like over the clothes and only like once or twice. And that's just not the case. And Jim Holt says that he wasn't being honest in the interview. So there's a lot here that is interesting. I guess to me, like I said, I've known so much about what's happened with this family, of all the different people I've talked to and all the different interviews that I've done, that nothing really surprises me. You know, I also heard that Michelle was like calling people up when people started finding out about Josh, and she was trying to like paint a narrative of it was this way and we just need to deal with it like this, and it wasn't represented to people as the actual way it was. It was like heavily downplayed, so people didn't really have a complete picture of what Josh was doing. And she was trying to bring people into her house to talk with them about the situation ahead of time to get ahead of the narrative. And Michelle and Jim Bob were like scrambling to try to keep people quiet so that they didn't ruin the show and they didn't ruin their chances for fame and being with the IBLP. And, you know, they were so motivated to get out of debt. They were so motivated to get their house built. They were so motivated to be famous that, yes, you can blame the IBLP for the culture, but literally no one forced them to go on that show. They had friends that were telling them that it was a bad idea. There was people in their lives that were saying, you guys should never go on do not do the documentary. Do not do this series. It's going to come out. Because when it did come out, it wasn't Jim Bob that said to himself, like, I blame myself for not being forthright and transparent about this. No, he blamed the media for talking about it. He blamed the police for releasing it. He blamed anyone that, like, he went after friends who knew things. He tried to defame and degrade people. He didn't blame anyone but Josh. He didn't blame Josh. He didn't blame himself. He didn't blame... They were blameless. It was everyone else's fault. And their explanation was, well, it was so far in the past. Like, why would we even say this? Well, because on the show, you're making them act like purity is a super big deal. You're making the kids wait until they get kiss until they get married. You're making them have chaperones. You're talking about all these weird rules you have. You're following all these guidelines, and you're acting like you're the moral authority for purity. And then your son, who is being touted as the golden child and like the star. Josh and Anna were so popular in the very beginning of the series. They had their own storylines. Their wedding was one of the first things that started and kicked off the entire show. They were an anchor of 19 Kids and Counting. And so when you think of it in that way, Josh was given this platform to look like a good guy, like this dad that was like starting off, and he had a business and he was going to go into politics. Then he goes into politics, and Jim Bob knows these things. He took no responsibility for the fact that he knew all of this, didn't disclose it to anyone, didn't tell anyone about it, and just said, well, it was something that happened when he was a child, and so we just need to like move on. Meanwhile, Josh never stopped doing anything badly. You know, he didn't stop looking at content online. He ends up cheating on Anna. He's found out to be on Ashley Madison. He's ends up meeting a woman that's an exotic dancer and apparently does things to her that are horrible. And she sues him, and then they drop the lawsuit because they settle. But she is stuck by her word that what happened when she met Josh was not consensual. And then you have later on him downloading stuff on his at the car lot. And what we're seeing in the trial is Jim and Bobby Holt are testifying about conversations they had with Josh, Bobby about what she heard Josh say about what he did, Jim about things that they talked about, technology. So it was like at the very last minute, they finally came in to like save the day and testify. They didn't do anything in the beginning. And that's always what didn't sit right with me for Jim Holt, was that you could have done so much more. You were a mandated reporter. You could have reported. You could have gone above and beyond than to an off-duty state trooper. You know, as a pastor and as someone that's been in the military, that the off-duty state trooper is not the correct person to report to. And yet that's where you guys went to, because that was the choice that Jim Bob made. And y'all knew that he wasn't going to do anything. It's just so frustrating. And it's going to be really frustrating for me to listen to Jim and Bobby Holt be the narrators of Josh's story, because Jim has his own crap. He is not the best guy. He has restraining orders out. His wife took out a restraining order for DV. His children, one of his sons took out one for DV. He cannot be around his family right now because the judge put in a final order for these restraining orders. He's got an order of protection against him by 2 separate people for 10 years. And so we're just supposed to believe that he had the best interests for Josh in mind when he only finally showed up for testimony at the very end. It's just frustrating because I think of like the girls here that Jim and Bobby claimed to care about and claimed to care about while they were testifying and claimed to care about in all their interviews. But did they really care about those girls? No. And did they really care about their kids? Because they allowed Josh to be around their kids after they knew Josh was doing stuff, and they brought Josh to Little Rock, and he was helping Jim with his campaign, and Josh had access to their kids, and Josh was over at their house. And they were still going to consider allowing Kaylee to be married to him. Not to mention they end up marrying Kaylee to someone that actually did things like that to his brother, allegedly, according to what Kaylee told me. And so, did they really dodge a bullet by not letting Kaylee marry someone like Josh when she ends up marrying someone like Josh? Is Jim Holt like the kind of guy that thinks he can fix people? I don't know. But Jim, Bob, and Michelle never planned to tell anyone, and they had people that were enabling them and assisting in the cover-up. And despite the fact that Jim and Bobby are being honest now about it, it's like sometimes it's a little bit too late. Like, where were you 20 years ago? Where were you 20 years ago? So that's what I have for this episode. Tell me what your thoughts are in the comments below. Bye, guys.